every RectAdmin application needs a data provider. So the data provider maps the queries and mutations done by RectAdmin components to your API backend. And if your API backend is not in the list of supported backends, then you will have to write your own. And it's not that intimidating. A data provider is basically an object with 9 methods, which are the nine possible queries and mutations that RectAdmin components do. And there are 2 pieces of advice I can give you to write your own data provider. The first one is to use guessers, and the second one is to use TypeScript. Let's see that in practice. So I have a REST API here that exposes, for instance, customers as a list of customers here, and you can see that it accepts query parameters to define the pagination and sort order, etc. I can go to the detail of a single customer by going to customer/ID route, and I want to display customers from this API in a RectAdmin application. So I have set up here a customers resource, and I'm using a list guesser, but it does not work because I don't have a get list. So if I look at the code, the resource here is using for the customer's name the list guesser, and the data provider is empty. So let's write it together. I will implement the get list method. It's an asynchronous method that takes a resource, the resource name, and the parameters as a second argument, and it should return, let me check, get list should return an array of records and the total number of records in a collection, and it receives these parameters that I can read. So to implement it, I will fetch the API with the name of the resource and return the data from that. I will be a bit smarter because I don't want to have the entire list of resources, so I will use the parameters, for instance, the pagination parameters, and I will pass them as query parameters here. Okay, I will do the same with the with the sort parameters that I will pass here, and I will I'm missing something here because again I need to return the total number of results. The total number of results in this API, and it will vary depending on your own API. In this case, it's returned in a header, in the X total count header here. So I need to read this header and to put the number in the total. So I'm not going to use fetch for that. I'm going to use a helper function called fetch.json, sorry, that RectAdmin provides. I prefer it to fetch because fetch.json will do the JSON decoding. It will throw an error when your HTTP response has a code that is not 200 or 300, and it will throw a meaningful error that RectAdmin can catch and render on screen. So I advise you to use fetch.json instead of fetch. The advantage here is that I don't have to call response.json because it's already decoded. And the data here is just a JSON, and the total is, right, it's the total X total count header, which I can read from the response. TypeScript is not happy because the total should not be a string. This is a string. The total should be a number, so I need to return that as an integer. And sometimes the header can be empty, so I'm returning that. And now TypeScript is happy, except it expects more methods, get one, get many, etc. But we'll see that in a minute. Now let me save that, go back to the application, and now I can see that list_guesser has correctly fetched the API. If I look at here the network tab and I refresh, I can see that it has fetched my localhost API with the correct parameters, and normally the pagination should work. Okay, it seems to be working fine, and the sorting should work as well. that's fine. So that's it for the get list. Now let's go to the second method that you should implement in a data provider, which is get1. Get1 will take an ID as a parameter and should return a record, a single record in the data key. So I'm going to implement get1. Get1 is also an asynchronous method, and GitHub Copilot has the response. It seems right, so let's check that. When I click on a row, that's right. The edit view, and in this case, it's an edit guesser. The edit guesser has fetched the current record with the get1 verb and correctly filled the form. And I can update the form, and now it will fail because I haven't implemented the update method. So I can just implement it in my data provider. It's also an asynchronous method, and once again, GitHub Copilot is right. It's possible that GitHub Copilot was trained on the RectAdmin documentation. Anyway, so GitHub Copilot returns a put request using the params.data in the body of the request, and I'm using the response.json in the data, and that's correct. So now if I'm updating this user and I'm saving, after the optimistic update, it works. It even changes the order because it's ordered by first name. So that's it for my data provider.update. And I won't go over all the rest of the methods. So there are 9 methods that you have to implement on a data provider, but it's the same process. I advise you to use a guesser to be able to test live your changes and the features when you implement them. I advise you to use the help of TypeScript to give you a hint over which params you will receive and what you should return. Of course, you will probably not use a localhost API, but something behind authentication and probably in HTTPS. The data provider writing documentation has clues on how to do that, but you now have the gist of the process of writing your own data provider.